I am in Lerna, Illinois at Lincoln Log Cabin State Historic Site. Now, Abraham Lincoln, the president, actually never lived here. He did visit a few times, but this is the farm of his father, Thomas Lincoln, and his stepmother, Sarah Bush Johnston. Once they had moved to Illinois from Indiana, Lincoln was an adult by then. He was 21, so he ended up leaving to New Salem, which is near Springfield, which wasn't the state capital then. But, you know, of course, he later went on to become a lawyer, politician, and then president. But his father remained a farmer for the rest of his life, and his stepmother, and this is actually their farm. Here's a historical marker, tells the history. Basically, this was Thomas Lincoln's last farm, and he died here in 1851. I'm gonna go into the visitor center here. This is pretty exciting. There aren't a whole lot of Lincoln historic sites or Lincoln family historic sites that I haven't been to, and really this is the last major one that I haven't been to. You'll find these markers all over the state of Illinois where Lincoln was. There's a museum inside with wax figures of Thomas Lincoln and Stephen Sargent during the wheat harvest. This is a land deed signed by Thomas and Sarah Lincoln in 1837, selling a different farm they tried earlier in Illinois before they came here. These are shoe lasts that were probably owned by the Lincolns. That is a shave horse, and that was used for woodworking. Thomas Lincoln was a carpenter. And this blanket chest was made by Thomas Lincoln, who built almost all of their own furniture. Turns out the title is not true. The site also highlights the Sargent family, whose farm was a few miles away, was a more progressive farmer who did things different from the Lincolns. Unlike Thomas Lincoln, Stephen Sargent owned this desk, which would have been used in many ways to compete in the national marketplace and economy. That is a model of what their farm was like, which we'll see later. And one of Nancy Sargent's books. Abraham Lincoln did like their book collection when he visited. Drawers and a spinning wheel owned by the Sargents. A scene depicting Bird Monroe's store in Charleston, Illinois. He would have sold to local farmers. These wax figures show what women's chores were. And this shows the transition from handmade goods to automated goods within Abraham Lincoln's lifetime. So I'm gonna head out and look at the historic Lincoln farm. This is a two-sided barn here. Looks like they use this barn to store hay. Take a peek in here. Yep, they mainly just stored hay. A lot of hay. Look, there's sheep. Sheep, come here. They look very confused. And this is the Lincoln Log Cabin. Thomas Lincoln was born in Virginia and grew up in eastern Kentucky. I've been to the site where he grew up and spent most of his youth life before getting married. And you can see it's kind of like an Appalachian style cabin because it looks like they have two cabins conjoined in the middle there. That's an Appalachian thing to do. So this is where Thomas Lincoln spent the last 8 years, I think, of his life farming. He tried a couple different farms in Illinois that didn't work out, but this one eventually worked out for him. And he was a very traditional farmer. You know, you're just totally self-sufficient. People back then who were self-sufficient farmers, they didn't really think of themselves in poverty or anything. You know, we think of that as poverty today, but back then, like, they thought they were independent. They were financially independent. They didn't work for someone else. They didn't have to pay for too many things. They just had to make sure they didn't go in debt. And if they provided for their families, everything was good. Another thing, this is not the original cabin. It was here, but it got sold off to be in the 1893 Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Apparently, like, the guy who owned this property then, a descendant of Sarah Bush Johnston, she like sold it to these Chicago contractors who wanted it. But he just sold the land, not the cabin. Then he sold the cabin to another guy who sold it to them for a way higher price. And then, like, things didn't go well to get into the exposition. Some people say that Robert Todd Lincoln, Lincoln's only surviving son, kind of messed with them. He was a corporate lawyer in Chicago at the time, so he might have, done something to make sure that his grandfather's cabin wasn't displayed. But apparently, like, the logs were like found and they were used as firewood. So the cabin was lost to history, unfortunately. But this is an exact replica on the exact site, built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. And some more bad news. It is very early in January, so unfortunately the Living History Farm and the cabins are not open right now. So I guess I'll just have to come back at another time. Still pretty neat seeing where Thomas Lincoln farmed his last farm. And Abraham Lincoln was here. I think I mentioned that. Thomas Lincoln also died in there. Not sure what that was. That might have been a meat house. Too small for a summer kitchen. I don't think that's a spring house. I don't think there's a spring, but it's kind of messed up. And these are the Lincoln chickens. How you guys doing? And this is the Sargent Farm. It was moved here. I think it was built in 1845. The Sargents were more progressive, you might say, in their farming techniques. They weren't like Thomas Lincoln in the sense, you just do what you can to survive. He was involved in the market economy. He was always looking for a profit, finding new ways of agriculture to improve profits, like, getting the newest plow or something like that. And Abraham Lincoln knew them. Apparently Lincoln visited this house whenever he passed by when he was doing the circuit, when he was a circuit lawyer. Okay, because the site is technically not open, I can't go inside. But he would always go for their books. Right when he got here, he would have walked right on this porch. I don't think that doorway is 6'4". Trying to do some creepy window peeking. This is a bedroom and they have a weaving loom back there. Abraham Lincoln would have been sitting right at that table. Well, probably not that table, but in this room. And something took a crap right on the stairs that Lincoln walked on. I guess they moved this here not only because it's historic and because Lincoln was here, but it also kind of provides a contrast in farming techniques. Like two different types of farmers at the time when the Industrial Revolution was really beginning. Also, I forgot to mention that Abraham Lincoln did own this property after his father's death. He owned the deeds so that his stepmother and whoever was there still could continue running the farm for a while. This is the ghost town of Farmington, Illinois. Technically it's still Lerna now, but this was a whole little community here. And right here is the Moore home. It was built by the most prominent family here, Reuben Moore. But a very historic event happened in here. This is the old historical marker. On January 30th, 1861, President-elect Abraham Lincoln came here to visit his stepmother, Sarah Bush Johnston Lincoln, who was living here while her farm was getting reconstructed. Of course, his father had been dead for like 10 years at that point. So he and his stepmother talked in here for a little while. They had a very close relationship. but unfortunately he would never see his stepmother again. Now, from what research I've done, I do think this is still the original house, or at least the original materials for the house, but it was reconstructed by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s. Also, it is preserved in there. It's clearly not open right now. I don't know when it is. I think it is very, very rarely open to the public because of, short staffing. Illinois has had some budget problems, and I know the state historic sites took a big hit with that. Never mind, it appears that no one's been in there for a long time. Wow, it is not looking good. Look at all the wall damage. It is not preserved at all. I don't know if you can see in there, but there's a stove and a bed, so they do have a couple things in there. This is where Lincoln met his stepmother for the last time. A couple miles away from the Lincoln log cabin is the Shiloh Presbyterian Church and the Thomas Lincoln Cemetery. There's an old historical marker, 1934, wow. And it's about the cemetery here. It's a very old cemetery. And this is it. The grave of Thomas Lincoln and Sarah Bush Johnston Lincoln. There's his Lincoln, father and stepmother of our martyred president. Their humble, worthy home gave to the world Abraham Lincoln. Thomas Lincoln served in the Kentucky militia back in 1795. It was kind of obligatory for all adult white men. He's buried right here, Thomas Lincoln. They did have a very, very strained relationship. The museum said that he would visit any chance he did. From my research, he didn't. He probably didn't. He had a lot of disagreements with him. They respected each other, but he didn't care for education or anything like Abraham did. So they had some problems, and Lincoln didn't even go to see him when he was terminally ill, even though he could have. So a little bit of daddy issues. And this is the grave of Sarah Bush Johnston. Lincoln really loved his actual mother, but she unfortunately died of milk sickness when he was fairly young. So Thomas Lincoln went back to Kentucky to marry her. She was a widow. I've been to her cabin site and where they got married in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. And I guess she just lived with Thomas Lincoln. But Abraham Lincoln and his stepmother did have a very good relationship. Lincoln's quote is saying she was his best friend. So they had a good relationship. And she lived 4 more years after his assassination. Just look around the cemetery, there are a lot of old graves. And this is a very unconventional place. Very few people actually come to visit here. Very, very few. There's a little sleeping doggo on that one. When Thomas Lincoln died in 1851, he was originally buried right here in this grave marker. They still preserve the old one. I guess he got moved. I wasn't aware of that. When President-elect Abraham Lincoln came back to visit his stepmother at the Moore House, he did come here to visit his father's grave for the first and only time. He would have been right here. You can see the stone is very antiquated. It's not been preserved well. They should move this into a museum to make sure it's okay. This marker may have been made after 1865 because look, it says father of martyred president. Interesting. And I've now been to all of the Lincoln family grave sites. Of course, I've been to Lincoln's tomb in Springfield, Illinois. Although I think that's the only one I don't have a video at. I've been to his mother's, Nancy Hanks Lincoln's grave in Indiana. I've also been to the grave of Abraham Lincoln's eldest son and only surviving son, Robert Todd Lincoln, at Arlington National Cemetery. And I've even been to Mary Todd Lincoln's parents' graves in Lexington, Kentucky. So if you like Lincoln historic sites, you should go check out my other videos because I've been to a bunch of them. I also have a lot of videos of roadside attractions and museums, really just anything. So please go check those out, and also subscribe. Thanks for watching.